A $200 jacket worn twice costs you $100 per wear. A $400 jacket worn 200 times costs you $2 per wear. Which one is actually cheaper? Most people look at the price tag and see a barrier, but the math cuts through marketing and emotion to reveal a different reality. You've been trained to optimize for the transaction, but your bank account is optimized for the duration. You think you're saving money by choosing the budget option, but you're actually paying a poverty premium, a mathematical penalty for the lack of capital. Your brain is experiencing cognitive price dissonance, trying to reconcile a low initial cost with a high frequency of replacement. You aren't being cheap. You're being outmaneuvered by an economy that bets you won't do the math on the second cost, the hidden taxes of storage, maintenance, and the mental energy required to manage items that don't actually work. This is not a lecture about taste. It is not a sermon about minimalism. It is a forensic audit of the psyche under financial pressure. You stand in the aisle comparing two numbers, and your nervous system does something old and fast and very understandable. It lunges toward relief. The lower price tag feels like oxygen. The cheaper object feels like permission. The purchase feels like control. But then the object enters your life, and life is where the accounting begins. Life is where the seams split, the battery dies, the coating flakes, the zipper jams, the cabinet fills, the duplicate gets bought because you cannot find the first one. The deal starts demanding maintenance, adaptation, and apology. You're not broken. You are a pattern-detecting machine making decisions in an environment built to sever cost from consequence. And until you learn to see the architecture underneath, you will keep mistaking immediate affordability for value, and you will keep calling the wound a strategy. The first discipline is brutal because it is simple. Cost per use is the only honest measure of value. Everything else is theater, retail theater, branding theater, emotional regulation theater. The price tag tells you what the object costs to acquire. It tells you almost nothing about what the object costs to own. That distinction changes your entire life. A $2,000 mattress that gives you 10 years of sleep can cost roughly 55 cents per use. A $300 kitchen gadget used twice costs $150 per use and then occupies a shelf like a failed experiment that keeps charging rent. One object supports your body night after night. The other becomes decor for your own self-accusation. This is what cognitive price dissonance looks like in the wild. You say the mattress is expensive because the number is large, and you call the gadget reasonable because the number is smaller, even while the smaller number produces the larger drain. The mind does this because the transaction is visible and duration is abstract. The transaction happens under fluorescent lights. Duration happens invisibly, one morning at a time, one repair at a time, one replacement at a time, one quiet resentment at a time. Cheap is seductive because it disguises itself as prudence. But a budget object with a short lifespan is often just a vampire in a low-price costume. It feeds on recurrence. It requires you to come back. It wants you in the loop again, next month, next season, next year. It wants another decision, another errand, another justification, another swipe. And each repetition has a cost not only in money but in cognitive bandwidth. Every time you rebuy the same category, you spend attention. Every time you troubleshoot a failing object, you spend mood. Every time you settle for the thing that almost works, you create friction inside the day. The poor purchase is rarely dramatic. It is granular. It steals from you in crumbs. That is why cheap can feel harmless while behaving like a leak. You don't remember the single drip. You remember eventually the warped floor. Mathematical inevitability is cruel in this way. It does not care about your intentions. If the object fails fast and must be replaced often, then the low sticker price was never the full number. It was just the first number. The first number is how they get you. The second number is how they keep you. This is why the boots theory still cuts so deep, because it is not really about boots. It is about timing, liquidity, and humiliation. Sam Vimes lays it out with obscene clarity. A good pair of boots costs $50. A cheap pair costs $10. The cheap pair leaks, wears out, and must be replaced. Over 10 years, the poor man spends $100 on 5 cheap pairs and still has wet feet, while the man who could afford the $50 pair spends less and stays dry. That is the poverty premium in one image. Not just paying more, but paying more for a worse experience. More money for less comfort, less durability, less dignity. The rich are not always richer because they are wiser. Sometimes they are richer because they can afford to exit the rebuy cycle. They can pay for duration up front. They can buy time with money, and time compounds. You cannot understand modern spending without understanding this trap. The cheap blender that burns out. The bargain shoes that alter your gait. The discount charger that fails and takes your device with it. The low-rent apartment with higher utility bills, mold risk, transport inefficiency, and emergency expenses. The old car with manageable monthly costs that converts weekends into repair logistics. The small fee for buying in smaller quantities because bulk pricing requires capital you do not have. The laundromat because the washing machine is unaffordable. The interest charge because the cash buffer is absent. Mathematical inevitability again. The person with less margin often pays more per unit, more per year, more in fees, more in time, more in stress. And then culture adds insult to injury by calling this poor planning. No, you're not broken. You are making adaptive decisions inside a cash flow structure that punishes delayed efficiency. Your nervous system is not stupid for choosing the $10 boots when rent is due. Your brain is solving for survival, not ideal optimization. But survival math and lifetime math are not the same math, and if you never separate them, shame enters the room and clouds the analysis. That is why this must remain a forensic audit of the psyche. You are not here to moralize your past purchases. You are here to identify the pattern. Cheap is not always bad. Expensive is not always wise. But if a low-cost object guarantees frequent replacement, inconvenience, or secondary expense, then it is not a saving strategy. It is a scheduled extraction. It is a payment plan disguised as a bargain. It is the architecture underneath scarcity, built to make short-term necessity look like long-term choice. Now look harder at the second cost, because the second cost is where the real damage hides. You think the receipt completes the story? It doesn't. The receipt is only the front door. After purchase comes storage, maintenance, mental load, and opportunity cost, and these are not decorative details. They are the architecture underneath your financial life. Start with space. Every object occupies square footage you are already paying for. If a 2,000 square foot home costing $300,000 translates to roughly $15 per year per square foot, then the box of unused appliances, abandoned organizers, duplicate linens, and backup impulse purchases are not sitting there for free. They are paying rent with your money. They are converting housing, your largest expense, into a museum of deferred decisions. Then maintenance. Everything you own asks for something. Cleaning, charging, repairing, updating, sorting, moving, storing, insuring, dusting, remembering. The average storage unit can run about $90 a month, and people have spent years paying thousands to preserve objects worth a fraction of the storage bill. That is not thrift. That is hostage negotiation with your own avoidance. Then the psychological toll. In one UCLA-linked study, women who described their homes with clutter-related language showed less healthy cortisol patterns across the day and more depressed mood, while restorative descriptions were associated with better stress recovery. In plain language, the things around you can become a low-grade physiological argument your body never gets to leave. Visual clutter is not neutral scenery. It is unresolved input. It asks tiny questions all day long. Put me away. Fix me. Use me. Sort me. Return me. Decide about me. You think you are ignoring it, but your nervous system is still indexing it. You're not broken. If you feel tired in a house full of unfinished purchases, you are not weak. You are metabolizing open loops. And then opportunity cost, the most invisible cut of all. Money sitting inside dead inventory is money not sitting in an emergency fund, not reducing interest, not earning yield, not purchasing peace. A $30 deal repeated 40 times is not cute. It is capital imprisonment. A closet full of cheap substitutions can equal the single durable item you kept postponing. A drawer full of bargain cosmetics, half-used cleaners, and specialty tools is often just a graveyard of fragmented intention. This is why the question is never, can you afford to buy it? The question is, can you afford to house it, manage it, replace it, think about it, and not deploy that money elsewhere? Once you ask that, the object changes shape. It is no longer a product. It is a contract. And many contracts are predatory even when the price tag looks friendly. And then there is the Diderot chain reaction, which is what happens when one purchase quietly recruits 5 more. You buy a backpack and suddenly the lunch bag looks wrong. You bring home a couch and the old side tables become embarrassing. You buy the cheap blazer and now you need the right shoes, the bag that harmonizes, the garment steamer, the dry cleaning, the storage solution, the capsule items to justify the first item. You replace the faucet and now the cabinet hardware looks tired. You paint one room and the adjoining room becomes intolerable by comparison. The original purchase was never alone. It was an anchor item that changed the identity standard of everything around it. This is why so many small purchases metastasize. The object enters not as a tool but as a style referendum. Denis Diderot described becoming a slave to a new dressing gown because the elegant item made the rest of his environment feel unworthy. That mechanism remains active in your life every day. The cheap purchase can be especially dangerous here because when something is bought without deep intention, it is often mismatched from the life around it, and mismatch breeds compensatory shopping. You try to solve aesthetic tension with more acquisitions. You buy complexity to relieve complexity. This is also where the complexity bias humiliates people. You assume more products equal better results. More serums must mean better skin. More cleaning products must mean a better home. More organizers must mean more control. More tools must mean more competence. Usually it means more management. Usually the result comes from consistency and quality, not category expansion. One cleanser used every day beats 6 miracle bottles aging under the sink. One pan you trust beats a stack of novelty cookware. One durable coat beats 3 compromise jackets that each fail in a different weather condition. The market profits by fragmenting simple outcomes into endless subproducts because every new subproduct can be sold as precision. But much of that precision is theater. Again, forensic audit of the psyche. What are you actually buying? Utility or identity repair? Function or narrative? Relief or permission to keep postponing the real purchase? You're not broken. You are trying to build coherence in a marketplace that profits from your internal incoherence. Once you see that, you stop asking, what else do I need? And start asking, what did this purchase just make me feel lacking without? That question exposes the trap immediately. Now we have to say something uncomfortable about expensive things too, because this analysis is not a morality play where premium equals virtue. Sometimes high prices reflect real materials, labor, durability, and repairability. Sometimes they reflect quality signaling fraud. Those are not the same thing. Modern branding has become exquisitely skilled at using typography, minimalist packaging, influencer restraint, and an atmosphere of curated seriousness to imply engineering that is not actually present. The product looks quiet, so you assume it is competent. The website looks surgical, so you assume the supply chain is disciplined. The box is heavy, the palette is muted, the copy sounds literate, and your brain translates aesthetics into substance. That translation is not always true. In fashion, one reported industry norm is a 2.2 times to 2.5 times markup at wholesale, followed by another markup at retail, with some retailers pushing as high as 4 times to compensate for markdown cycles. In a separate NBER analysis of branded versus private label goods, the majority of categories showed substantial branded markups, often in the range of about 1.40 to 2.10 as a lower bound, with some categories far higher. Translation: brand distance from production reality can be enormous. And the distance is not just financial. In 2024, reporting on Dior's supply chain cited an Italian court filing alleging a Dior-branded handbag supplied for about €53 and sold for about €2,700, while also raising serious concerns about labor exploitation and the gap between luxury image and production conditions. You do not need to become a cynic to learn from this. You just need to stop assuming that expensive automatically means honest. A high price can indicate durability. It can also indicate marketing power, distribution layers, symbolic scarcity, or the monetization of your desire to belong to a certain category of person. This is why the solution is not buy cheap or buy premium. The solution is to interrogate the object. Is the material better? Is the warranty real? Can it be repaired? Will you use it enough to drive cost per use down? Is it solving a recurring problem or staging an identity scene? Is the quality tangible or merely signaled? If it is merely signaled, the expensive object is just a more elegant vampire. If it is genuinely durable and heavily used, the expensive object may be the cheap one in disguise. Price alone cannot tell you which is which. You have to look at the architecture underneath. So the tactical reframe begins here. You stop behaving like a consumer mark and start behaving like an architect of margin. Margin is not extravagance. Margin is breathing room. Margin is the distance between a small inconvenience and a full-scale financial event. Margin is what allows you to buy the durable version when the flimsy version is baiting you. Margin is what keeps one broken appliance from becoming a credit card balance. Margin is what lets you walk away from false bargains because you are no longer shopping for emotional anesthesia. To build margin, you must define enough before income rises, because if you do not define enough, every raise simply funds a more expensive confusion. Enough shoes, enough skincare, enough cookware, enough subscriptions, enough decorative objects, enough backup items, enough little ambitions bought in plastic. Wealth is not accumulation. Wealth is optionality. Wealth is the ability to delay a purchase without panic. Wealth is the absence of urgency in the aisle. Wealth is having so little dead inventory in your house that when something breaks, your cash and your attention are both available. This is where the identity shift matters. You're not broken. You were taught to think of spending as self-expression, reward, coping, competence, adulthood, aesthetics, optimization, and care. Sometimes it is those things, but if you never run the numbers, it is also misdirection. The disciplined adult is not the person with the nicest things. It is the person who can distinguish desire from drain, friction from function, quality from signaling fraud, and affordability from mathematical inevitability. The disciplined adult knows that every object entering the home is applying for resources: space, maintenance, replacement, mood, money, memory. The disciplined adult does not ask, "Can I get this cheaper?" before first asking, "Will this become a recurring problem?" And what will this cost me after the checkout screen disappears? Once you start living like this, you become calmer. Not because everything is affordable, it isn't. Not because inflation disappears, it won't. But because the invisible equations become visible, and visibility reduces helplessness. You begin to see that many of your worst purchases were not luxuries, but underpriced liabilities. You begin to understand why some categories deserve patience, why some deserve one excellent version, and why some deserve nothing at all. The home starts to feel less like a storage site for interrupted intentions and more like a controlled environment. The architecture underneath starts to reveal itself, and that is the emotional turn nobody explains to you. Discipline does not feel glamorous at first. It feels like grief. You stop buying the cheap promise of transformation. You stop purchasing fantasies in the language of practicality. You stop inviting a vampire into your house and calling it a bargain. You stop confusing on sale with strategically timed. You stop letting cognitive price dissonance narrate the decision. You learn to tolerate the clean pain of waiting instead of the dirty pain of rebuying. You learn to walk past the low entry price if the exit price is hidden. You learn to buy fewer categories, better versions, slower. You learn that some things should be rented, some should be borrowed, some should be repaired, some should be bought once, and many should never cross your threshold. That restraint is not deprivation. It is structural intelligence. It is what happens when you stop negotiating with the symptom and start correcting the system. You're not broken. Say it again because shame has a way of returning right when clarity arrives. You're not broken. If your house contains the evidence of coping, aspiration, exhaustion, and confusion, then your house contains evidence of being human under pressure. But from this point forward, you are allowed to become clinical. You are allowed to walk through your own rooms like an auditor, to look at a shelf and ask what each item has yielded, to look at a closet and calculate cost per use instead of retail fantasy, to look at a brand and separate quality from choreography, to look at clutter and see not mess but trapped capital and trapped attention, to look at your old habits and notice that many of them were never moral failures. They were unexamined equations. And once an equation is visible, it can be changed. This is sober empowerment, not the fantasy that you will never make another bad purchase. You will, but now you will recognize the signature faster. Now you will know that the cheapest option may be the most expensive contract. Now you will notice the second cost before it colonizes your space. Now you will see the architecture underneath before the machine closes around you. Apply the replacement test tonight. If an item you own disappeared today, would you spend money to replace it? If the answer is no, it is a vampire in your house. We are building the architecture underneath the machine.